You're listening to Best Forevers, a podcast for kindred spirits, a podcast that encourages you to love more on your friends and to further consider the issues that plague friendships. I'm Alysa Lucas, and you know what is scary? Pranks. Oh my God, they're terrifying and embarrassing, and I dislike them very much. But perhaps I'm a little confusing because I absolutely adore the true TV show Impractical Jokers, where four, quote, lifelong friends compete to embarrass each other. So, okay, some of the jokes Sal, Joe, Q, and Murr pull on each other make me cringe, and I get secondhand embarrassment, but they seem to truly enjoy the time they have together. However, I don't think we'd all have the same reaction to being the butt of their jokes. So in the second episode of the very special month of Best Forevers called Friends to the End, we'll talk about the light and dark side of intentionally embarrassing your friends. When thinking about Halloween, I'm sure one of the first things you think of is trick or treat. But unfortunately, pranks may not bring a whole lot of treats because pranks are in fact called tricks. The goal may be to embarrass or confuse another person, but what is the intent? Is the prank lighthearted and designed to be fun and to bring people together? Does it bring great laughs? Or even with good intent, someone can be completely horrified to be the target and to be embarrassed in front of others. So it may all be about knowing where the line is at. What line can you cross? What line can you push? Or when do you know you have crossed a line that you should have never crossed? Do you know your friends well enough to know if they would handle a prank well? Do you know if your friends would laugh and then do a prank back to you? Or do you think a prank is a bad idea? Okay, maybe I'm just a little too uptight. But we're first going to talk about a core part of pranks, and that is, what is intentional embarrassment? So let's first go with embarrassment. According to William Sharkey in the 1997 chapter, Why Would Anyone Want to Intentionally Embarrass Me? Embarrassment is defined as, quote, a short-lived emotional response to social chagrin or uneasiness that occurs as a result of a discrepancy between one's idealized role identity and one's presented role identity and the certainty that follows an incident. End quote. Right. Okay. So let's break this down a little bit more. It's a short-lived emotional response. That emotional response is anxiety or fear due to negative sanctioning or lower evaluations from others, according to the same chapter. So, and then there's an uneasiness because we are trying to present ourselves in a certain way. We have a public face that we're trying to present, and that is being threatened by the person who's pulling a prank on us. So this is something that is perhaps very close to us that we might not talk about with other people, what face we're trying to present in public in front of certain people in certain situations or contexts, right? That maybe if it's among friends, you're okay being embarrassed, but if it's in front of your crush or a coworker or any of those other types of situations, you might be like, please don't threaten my face by embarrassing me. And this is what I call April Fool's Day, face threatening day, because that is nothing but people coming up with ways to like trick people or confuse them or make them look stupid or whatever the case is. So I'm always like, do not try me on April Fool's Day, y'all. Maybe as the communication person in me that I just want to protect other people's face so much. Like, I rather embarrass myself than embarrass a student in class, for example, that I just am really try to think about how other people might feel, because being embarrassed can be awful. So we all experience embarrassment, and it is something that we could probably all remember like it was yesterday when we have been horribly embarrassed by a family member or a best friend or a romantic partner. And it is typically, as Sharkey would describe, an emotion most individuals avoid because we always try to protect ourselves or maybe other people so that they don't feel embarrassment. So one of the reasons why we do this is because it could represent our degree of social incompetence, as noted by Sharkey, right? So although someone else has set us up, that we might not show that we know how to navigate social interactions, that we don't know the norms or we're not appropriate, but really we might, but we were just set up by someone else and probably set up by someone that we care about. So, okay, here's the thing, friends. I'm okay with embarrassing myself. If I fell, I'd be like, I fell. Right? Hey, did you check to be sure I was okay before you laughed at me? That might be the most important thing. In fact, this is so hilarious. Okay, so in my most recent Dark Side class, I shared so many of my embarrassing stories, apparently, that I asked them on their first exam to name one of the embarrassing events I shared in class as an extra credit question. And basically, I posted this on Twitter, but I'm saying that too. Joke's on me, because students, there was no consistency. Everyone had like a different embarrassing story that I shared. There was like 10 more across 31 students. And I was like, what the heck? Why? Like, I'm okay sharing embarrassing things. Like, these are things that are out of my control. So let me give you some examples, some of which I might have shared on the podcast before, but let's just bring it down and bring it all together and just lay it out on the table. Okay. So one of them I told about is when I was 12, I was trying to do one of those little sweet like crossover turns on the roller skating rink, where you put like your right foot over your left and then your right foot as you go around the corner. Yeah, when I was 12, one time it didn't work out for me and I fell on my face and I broke my front tooth in half. And oh my gosh, like there was so much embarrassing, of the fall, breaking my tooth in half, and like so many things that happened after that. But again, it's not like I went in there being like, hey, I sure hope I fall on my face today. So even worse, maybe this is probably people's like greatest fear. So when I was in high school, I was a cheerleader and I had been sick for an entire week. And my classmates voted for me for the sophomore class to be part of this relay race for a pep rally on that Friday. And so it was my lap of the relay race would be cartwheels. So it makes sense, cheerleader, etc. And so my mom was out of town and I was like, Dad, I have to go to school. The people have requested that I do cartwheels, when I should have just stayed home. Because when you have a head cold for a week and you try to do cartwheels, so I did one cartwheel and I was fine. And then I did a second one and I was like, this isn't good. And then I did a third one. And then I woke up on the floor of the gym in front of my entire school with all these teachers and folks around me to be like, are you okay? Apparently I landed on my shoulder and that got sent to the hospital in an ambulance to be sure I didn't have a concussion. And like, I can laugh about it now because I survived high school despite the fact that I fell on my head in front of everyone. But I also think that because I was in high school at a time where there wasn't cell phones to record the event, I was able to make it through. But again, in front of the whole school, right? In front of the whole school. Then much later, when I taught at Mansfield University, I fell off the stage when I was teaching a class. I was able to catch myself, and I don't allow cell phones. And so everyone was like, oh my God. And then it was like, once everyone knew it was okay, we laughed about it. And in this particular case, I think I said something along the lines, don't you wish I allowed cell phones so you could have got that on video? Okay, here's the thing though. Those are things where, I fell, I was sick and I passed out, blacked out during cartwheels, which is like one of the worst times to black out, right? And I fell off the stage. These were things out of my control. No one pushed me when I was roller skating. No one gave me something to make me black out, and no one rigged the stage so I could fall. So we all experience embarrassing things where we trip and fall, or we knock something over, or we say something stupid. We have those experiences. So none of us probably enjoyed those experiences per se, even though all these years later I'm laughing about it now. Again, my caveat is that I survived high school despite that happening. I survived my life despite falling and breaking my tooth in half in middle school. But we generally don't like the feeling of being embarrassed. People laugh at us, they mock us, they make fun of us, they do jokes. So why would we ever want to intentionally embarrass anyone? So here's the core of pranks, right? Is that it's not just embarrassment, but it's intentionally embarrassing people. So in the chapter by Sharkey, he talks about how intentional embarrassment is generally rare because not everyone wants to be embarrassed, but it still happens. And he sort of notes like maybe people don't remember how much they've embarrassed other people, right? Did you block it out of your head? Or maybe they don't want to admit to it. It's kind of like with gossip. We all probably gossip, but we don't actually want to say that we do it, right? That we don't want to say that this thing that's unacceptable is kind of secretly acceptable, right? That there's still some level of it being problematic. So we don't want to say we might do it, but we might actually do it. So although it's rare, it might not be as rare as we think it is, and it might still happen more than we want it to. Right? And so that's the thing. We have someone who wants to embarrass another person. A lot of times there are people who know us well. We don't typically pull pranks on people we don't know unless you're like Ashton Kutcher and someone's getting punked. But in that case, those were celebrities getting punked and they were probably his friends in some way, right? So he still was punking people he knew, right? But in general, we try not to do that. If we do that, it turns into a TV show or an experiment for an ABC show. And in general, people might not like the fact that they were deceived in some way or tricked, right? That we generally don't like that. But let's talk about what embarrassers do, right? They have goals, y'all. What's that? Like hashtag be a gold digger, right? So when you're embarrassing someone, Sharkey talks about there being two sort of meta goals that are happening. So the first one, or the first goal, is efficiency. So basically, pranksters will look for the best way to prank someone that takes the least amount of time and the least amount of effort. And so one of the things to consider is that they will do whatever is easiest. And that could be simply pulling a chair out from underneath someone, there's lots of different things simple and easy and probably low risk is tapping someone on the opposite shoulder so they look and then they're like, oh, no one's there. And then they turn the other way and you're like, oh, you got me, right? Like something like that. I'm sure most people are like not offended by unless someone does it all the time, right? But it's going to be efficient. It's like whatever's easiest, whatever they have on hand, whatever they can do to make the prank happen. The second goal of an embarrasser is the appropriateness of the prank. And so they want to be appropriate so that it is viewed, quote, as acceptable to social others, end quote. So we're not going to do something that's completely horrific because then that might lead into bullying, it might lead into hazing, and it might lead into revenge. So things that are much darker, right? And so if you're just trying to, joke with someone, you might go with something that might be considered appropriate. But the issue here is that one of the things that can be a problem is that efficiency goal cuts right through appropriateness. So I was talking about pulling out a chair from someone underneath someone and that might be efficient, right? Kind of like pull it out and they kind of fall on their butt and everyone's like, people point and laugh. And even the person be like, oh my gosh, you got me or whatever. But if you do that in front of friends, that's probably appropriate and it being efficient because it was just something you saw and you just immediately did it. That's fine. But if you do it in front of the entire cafeteria in high school or on a college campus, it's probably not as appropriate. In fact, it might be seen as mean or rude or whatever the case is. Or even sometimes people might be like, okay, that wasn't appropriate, but I can get over it. It might not be as big of a deal as some of the elaborate pranks that people might play, right? So we should probably look at the context to determine whether or not pranking or intentionally embarrassing our friends is appropriate. So for example, something that friends participate in a lot are bachelor and bachelorette parties. So embarrassing a bride-to-be at her bachelorette party is probably more of an acceptable situation than embarrassing her at the wedding, right? Where it might be more serious or concern or it costs a whole lot more money, right? So it might not be as appropriate. Overall, though, the relationship most prime to intentional embarrassment, like pranks, is friendship, according to the chapter, and that it's most likely to happen in same-sex friendships. And the reasoning is that maybe we understand more of someone who is the same biological sex as us. We might be able to understand what they might bother them, or what might get a rise out of them, or might laugh at them. That's the reasoning that Sharkey gives. So, beyond those goals, there are certainly goals about the embarrassing and how they do it, and so on and so forth. So the next part of intentional embarrassment that I want to talk about that is outlined in the chapter is reasons for embarrassment. And here's what's important, though, is that we have to consider that when we prank someone, that we have our point of view as the pranker or as the prankster, and then there's the point of view of the person who's been the target of the prank. Right? So we have to consider that not everyone might be on the same page as us, because our intentions might not be the same thing as it being viewed as problematic. So we really do need to consider the target before we do a prank, especially if we want to still be friends on the other end of a prank. Okay, so here is the embarrasser's perspective, right? So this would be why they embarrass other people, right? Number one, and probably the one that is seen as most successful, is achieving solidarity, right? This is the way in which to bond with people. This is a great way to be a friend, right? Like this can be a lot of fun, especially if there's like back and forth. So I've been watching Supernatural, and in this case, they're siblings. So you have Sam and Dean, and there's like one episode where they're pranking each other back and forth, and one of them is, Dean is very specific about the rock music that plays in his baby, which is his car. And, one of the things that his little brother does is change it to a station that he will not like, and he turns it up really loud, so then it embarrasses him because people might hear that he's playing crappy music, right? That's kind of like, okay. And then Dean's like, how am I going to get Sam back? And this back and forth and that sort of thing, right? And so it can be a way to bond and have fun and those sorts of things. And I think that's sort of in the light side and the right intention, especially in friendship. But then we have some other things, like we have to help socialize individuals into various groups. So there might be a little prank like, oh, you're new here, let's play a prank on them. And again, I love television. So I was watching the Cobra Kai TV show. It's on Netflix right now. And that is, the TV show that takes the continuation of Karate Kid. And if you haven't seen it, it's amazingly just what we all probably need right now in the pandemic. But one of the things is, like, when people, so Ralph Macchio, who plays the main character in Karate Kid, he now owns a car business, like he sells cars. And so this kid starts working there, and the employees play pranks on him to socialize him into the place. And they're actually kind of mean pranks, and so Ralph Macchio has to step in and be like, that's not what it's like here, like this person is a jerk. So sometimes you're having people who don't necessarily represent the entire culture of the friendship group or the workplace play these pranks. And so, but one of them, he delivers like a nudie magazine instead of a report to the boss, right? Like, okay, so that's kind of a jerk move, right? But the guy doesn't want to work there anymore because of these sort of moves, right? Other ways in which people embarrass besides socialization, which again, you have to be concerned that could turn into hazing for like sports teams or other groups, Greek life, bands, so on and so forth, that it could lead to some bad behavior that goes beyond intentionally embarrassing someone, just goes way beyond into the realm of problems, right? Other things that might be problematic could be negatively sanctioning their actions. So as a teacher, I try to never embarrass students, but I know that might be a tactic that teachers might use that if a student is acting up in class, like if you embarrass them, then maybe they'll stop, but I don't want to shut students down. And so I'll I have like a list. Like first I'll just ignore the issue, then I'll make eye contact, then I'll joke about it, then, I'll say something where I'm just like, can we just stop whatever this is? And then, but I never say it maybe directly to the student. And then if I need to pull the student aside, I do. But you can basically embarrass someone and then they learn that the actions that they're doing is not appropriate. And I think that's something that people do, and it might be a light embarrassment, but still, depending on how it's perceived by the target, it could be a good thing or a bad thing. People embarrass because they're trying to gain or maintain their status position in relation to the target. So they might be embarrassing them to show that they have the upper hand in a place of business or in their friendship group. You can embarrass to discredit another person, make them look silly in front of other people. And then the final one is self-satisfaction. They enjoy doing it. And here's the thing, the target is more likely to attribute pranking to someone just enjoying seeing people squirm or seeing people be embarrassed, right? Like, I love Impractical Jokers, but generally they're embarrassing each other, right? And they have sort of that deal. Like, they don't necessarily do it to other people per se. But there's still moments where I'm like, you all enjoy this way too much. But I do think that they would not embarrass other people unless the people wanted to be involved, right? Like, so there's a self-satisfaction. I mean, it's like slapstick comedy. You can't help but like laugh if someone trips or, slips on the banana peel, those kinds of things. But like some people really enjoy it where it feels like they're, what do you call it? Like twirling their evil mustache, right? They're like, ooh, pranking, right? But from the target's point of view, like that might be seen as negative. They also, from the target's perspective, the reasons why someone embarrasses them is going to be far more negative in sense. Like they can attribute it, maybe not necessarily to achieving solidarity, but maybe about controlling relationships or the person impressing others at their expense, violating some relationship rule, trying to establish or maintain power, or trying to retaliate. And all those on the surface obviously are negative. Control, violations, power, retaliation. These are words that don't generally produce confidence and certainty in our lives, right? These are things that are like, ooh, this might not be good if someone's trying to show that they have power over me, or they knew that topic was off limits to embarrass me about. And so that's a violation of a relationship rule. So those are typically the reasons, right? So that is part of the planning process for the person who's embarrassing other people's or pulling the prank. And those can become elaborate. Another episode from Media, Saved by the Bell, one of my favorite shows as a kid. Okay, Zach Morris is a huge manipulator, but early on when he was in middle school, I believe it was the first season, or the first two seasons when Haley Mills was their teacher, and Haley Mills plays the twins in Parent Trap, which is also a movie I adore, but she's their teacher, and so she loves pranks, and so they try to prank her, and so they go through these elaborate things where they paint, I don't want to spoil it, but there's an incident where they paint a chair and she sits down in it and she gets it on the back of her sweater. But the students try to rig a bucket of water so that it dumps on her above a doorway when she goes through, but the principal gets it, right? So there is a lot of design, like how can we make this happen? And so one of my former graduate students, she loved pranks, but it was always, I never saw it as like, it's evil or anything like that. But she did record one of the pranks and then was in my dark side class. And so we shared it when we talked about intentional embarrassment. And there was one person who they pranked where she was going through her drawers in the student office. And in there, like a fake mouse or something like that jumped out, and the girl screams and everyone laughs and that sort of thing. But it's like, how do you do that? How many people are involved with what you're gonna do? How do you come about it? How do you decide that you are gonna prank someone? Is it something that, going back to efficiency, you do in the hot moment, right? You're just like, oh, I have to do it. Or is it something that you plan for a long time, right? There is some design that goes to it. And so what does embarrassment look like? So how do embarrassers embarrass people? Well, in the Sharky chapter, people do it to recognize someone or to praise someone. So when I think about this, I think about people who get sung to on their birthday, and they get hats, and all the employees come out and they're like, happy birthday, da, 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 ba, 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 and everyone's like, yeah, and the person is either loving it or absolutely hating it, right? So like those sorts of events I see generally as more positive, but still there are some people who, if you did that to my dad, for example, I wouldn't. That's the thing. He was like, don't you dare do that. And like, I'll tease and be like, maybe we should get them to sing you happy birthday. And he's like, giving me the eye, like, girl, don't you dare do that. I am your father. I helped bring you into this world, and I can take you out, right? So there are some people who don't like it at all, right? There are some people who embarrass other people by criticizing them or correcting them, especially, intentional embarrassment a lot of times is something that happens in front of other people. So it happens in public, right? So you have the criticism, the correction, you have teasing, which is often is used with humor. And so teasing is, I always think of the Brady Bunch when Billy Hinton, the local bully, is like to Cindy Brady, who has a lisp, and he's like, baby talk, it's a wonder you can walk. But I think of teasing like my brother's kind of teasing me about wearing a headgear and that sort of stuff. And even that's kind of like, I'm sure they're like, sorry about that. I'm sorry you had to wear a headgear. Sorry I made fun of you about it. Sorry I tried to post a picture of that on Facebook. Like, bro, what are you doing? But I think teasing a lot of times is like sort of like joking with people and like wink, wink, and that might be on the end of the light side. Like I see recognition, praise, and teasing maybe more on the light side. The criticism, correction in front of other people, we start to move across the continuum, trying to cause a target to look unpoised, like tripping people and putting a sign on their back that says, kick me, I'm whatever, or violation of one's privacy, right? So embarrassing people by like revealing something that's their business or walking in on them. There's a whole Friends episode where they're all walking in on each other in the bathroom and trying to get each other back. And that's, violation of one's privacy. So here's the thing though. You can see that there are positive sides and there are negative sides. And what the issue is that when you intentionally embarrass someone, even as someone who you absolutely adore, care about, and love, that it is risky because there can be consequences. And so Sharkey outlines some of the consequences for embarrassers. They might flub attempts, right? So they embarrass themselves while trying to embarrass someone else. The person they're trying to embarrass could end up not liking them anymore. They could embarrass someone else, like when the principal got it instead of the teacher on Saved by the Bell. So you have an unintended target. And I think most people don't want to hurt other people. And it's not necessarily they want to hurt their friends, but certainly there's a target and you might not want it to go beyond the target. But for a lot of people, they get pranked in the process and they do not like it, especially if they don't know you or they're like, why me? What did I do? Right? But one of the things is they also have to do that work, right, to restore face because you are threatening someone's face. So they might have to do something like, oh, let me help you up. And that was my bad. I was doing that to you. Like they have to do things to help make that person feel better and to restore any face they have and a way to erase the embarrassment, right? And then the embarrasser could learn that embarrassing their friends is appropriate or maybe not appropriate. Maybe pranks go too far, right? Maybe there's some level of it's not just saying something, it's doing something. There's some act that is happening, and you might learn that this is not the person that I want to prank in the future because I know they don't like it or it didn't work out well for me, and so maybe that's a bad idea. Now, for the target, when you get embarrassed, some of the consequences is immediately you can show people you're embarrassed because people blush, right? Maybe some more than others. So, and maybe that's what some embarrassers are looking for. They want to see you blush. They want to see you cringing and that sort of thing, like, oh my God, right? But for target, they may appear incompetent and less attractive. They may experience social self-esteem and psychological discomfort. There might be hostility, and it could change completely how they see the embarrasser. And especially if you're friends with this person, there might be too many risks that it doesn't allow you to achieve your goal of solidarity, right? Instead, they see it as self-satisfaction or trying to control them or manipulate them in some way or trying to make them look stupid in front of someone else, like I said before, like a crush. So let's talk about this, right? What is the light side? Some people really enjoy pranking others, being pranked, watching pranks on YouTube, watching it on television, a la Impractical Jokers. I think what it is I just love that their friendship is based in this and that they clearly have a solid relationship and that they're all on board, right? I would love to interview the friends from Impractical Jokers. Like, has there been a joke that's gone too far? Was it harder to do early on and then it became a norm in the friendship? I have so many questions for them, but that is an example where you can see like how fun it is, especially for them. I mean, like I said, maybe I'm just a little uptight. I'm more likely to be okay with embarrassing myself, but there is something about like planning to embarrass someone else that I guess I the face part, I don't know, like, I would hate to hear that I embarrassed someone else intentionally, like, or someone was even embarrassed when I didn't intend to do it. I don't know, but maybe y'all have insight about why some people don't like pranks and why others don't, or we could talk about that more. What if you have a friend who can't take a joke? Like, I think I have a sense of humor, but maybe not when it comes to intentional embarrassment. But why is pranking fun? There's exciting and novel situations. It's exciting perhaps to think about how the prank will go down. You're like making predictions. Oh, he's going to be so mad, or he's going to get his back 10 times over. And then I also think that for some people, the adrenaline that must kick in when the prank is happening, and even more that it can be fun from reliving the event. And now people have TikToks, I'm sure, and they bring it up. And so it can be like, oh, every year I'm going to show you the time I got pranked because it's hilarious, or let me tell you about my best prank, or keep an eye out on me because I'm pranking people. But I also feel like the dedication to planning is a way for friends to come together. If they're doing it together, this could be a great way to spend time collaborating, problem solving, like all these skills. Like maybe you should be talking about your elaborate pranks on job interviews. Actually, probably not. They'll probably go, don't do that here. But it's like you have to come up with the best plan. You might need other people to be involved. Then like thinking about how the next person might prank you back. Like you might spend a lot of time. You just think that the friends who continue to prank each other, there's something that it says about the relationship that is special enough to A, want to prank each other, but also B, that they can be pranked, and that there is this level of mischief and fun and like just being like, let's get them. Like there's only so many people you can embarrass or that you would let embarrass you. So it might say something really unique or special about your particular friendship. And I definitely think that for some friends that really showcases the type of friendship you have. It can also show that you know each other very, 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 very well. You know what topics would be off limits. You know what might be seen as hilarious by the target. And so you can actually do the planning and preparation because you have some idea of who this person is and how they respond to things so that you can anticipate what the reaction might be. And that you might realize that if it went too far, that the friend might apologize and forgive, right? That you can apologize and that they'll forgive you because you are friends, right? But there is a dark side because, again, there's always that risk. So let's consider some of the issues of the dark side beyond some of the consequences we've already talked about. So in 2016, Hanson O'Haver wrote the article, Pranks Are Bad for Vice. And you can find the link and show notes along with the Sharky chapter. And one of his reasons for why he doesn't like pranks is that, quote, pranks exploit a balance of power. And I think this is an interesting point. Certainly, we've talked about the control in a relationship and trying to create or gain or maintain power. But I think that is a really interesting point because when you pull a prank with a friend, does it indicate that the prankster feels like they have more power in their relationship? And do we only prank people who we think have less power in our friendship group? And so it might reveal that there's some sort of pecking order in your friendship groups. And yeah, like if you've watched the 70s show, like you can see like that there are some people who lead the group. You know, Hyde, I think, has a lot of interpersonal power, and that people look up to him and that sort of thing. And then they use Eric's basement to do most of their shenanigans, to smoke their pot and whatever else. And so I think he has a level of power and is a leader of the group because he provides that space. So people do have different power, but are they always pranking like Jackie because she's younger and she's female? Or do they prank Fez because he's an outsider to the group coming from a different country? Or do they prank this person, like the Ashton Kutcher character? I'm blanking on his character name, but like Kelso, excuse me. And maybe they prank him because in the show he's not as smart as everyone else. So does it indicate how we might feel about people, that we might be more likely to embarrass some people than others? So that might be something to consider in friendship. If you're always talking about pranking one individual, it might indicate that there are some power differences. And in friendship, we're supposed to have technically equal power, right? That we're peers, and that there are so many great things about friendship. They're enjoyable, it's voluntary, they generally don't judge us, they provide us support, we can talk about so many things, but also that we have similar levels of power. Now, that might not be the case across all friendships, and pulling pranks might be one way to see who does have the power in the friendship. Hanson also states, quote, ultimately, pranks ignore the fundamental truth that living can be hard and most people are trying to do their best, end quote. Now, he wrote this in 2016, but he might as well have written during the pandemic, because sometimes can we just get a break, right? This makes me think of how stressful the pandemic has been and how a prank could be like the final straw, right? It's the straw that broke the camel's back, right? It's someone's strength to make it through the day could be compromised by a prank, right? Especially from someone who we might see as being close to us and care about us. But again, we don't usually pull pranks on strangers because we probably get our butt kicked. I don't know. We don't know what might happen if we pull pranks on strangers. So we do it on our friends. But again, it's like, but why would you do that to your friend? Okay. And some people might be like, go back to the light side. But again, it's always risky, friends. So I also come down to, and one of the questions that I would ask if I ever had the wonderful opportunity to interview the Impractical Jokers, I always think about crossing the line, and that is possible with pranking. And I would want to know if they've ever found the line, or that they have an agreement about where the line is, and an understanding and rules in their friendship so that they can do what they do and have the fun that they have without it hurting people's feelings, right? So I once had a student tell me that their friends used a Sharpie, a blue Sharpie, on her face when she was sleeping. So they drew all over her face with a Sharpie. Okay, how many of you have seen the Friends episode where Ross draws the mustache on Rachel and how upset like she gets that she draws on his face, and like she makes him pay for a lot of things, and basically he has to do a lot of work to make it up to her, right? But from that episode, we might learn that Sharpies perhaps don't come off easily. It's not a washable marker, right? So they took photos of her while she was sleeping. So they not just drew on her face, my student, with the Sharpie, but then they also took photos. And so she's telling me this in class, and this has been many years, and I remember it specifically because it was a summer class, and so there were less people in the room. And when she was telling the story, my jaw was on the floor because I've already told you, pranks are scary. I don't like them. I might be uptight when it comes to that. I love protecting other people's face. Like, the communication person in me was like, oh my gosh, like knowing that for some people this works, and who am I to judge other people's friendships? I'm not the one to judge them at all, right? But I just was like, oh my God. And she thought, she was laughing about it. And I was like, okay, not only do you have to think about the prank, right? That what if she had to work the next day? Oh my God. What if there were like family pictures, or like, do you know that as friends what they might have going on the next day? Maybe you do. Maybe your alcohol, you have some liquid courage, who knows? But like, oh my gosh. So you not only have to think about the prank now, but again, you have to think about the evidence that you can continue to go back to, and it continue to be shared and bringing up embarrassing stuff. So basically that picture lasts for the rest of her life, and her friend's life, right? Like, so when she gets married, I'm like, are they about to bring the Sharpie picture back out, right? Like every birthday is the Sharpie picture out. Is it texted to her? Those sorts of things. And I just think, like, for some people, they think it's fun. And so if she's into pranks and they did it, like I said, I'm not going to judge, like, it works for your friendship. And that's what you need to figure out, because there might be a line. And if you know that someone doesn't like pranks, or you don't know how they'll react, or you don't know what they have to do the next day, that maybe doing a Sharpie on their face is not a good idea. But that's what you need to find out in your friendship. So if you're listening to me now going, but I love pranks, and I want to know if I can do them in my friendship. Well, that's what I would say is, like, where's the line? Have you talked to your friends about pranks? Have you seen something embarrassing happen to them? How did they react? Have they ever said anything to you where they're like, don't ever do that to me, I would die? Or like, someone's going through depression, right? Like, read the room, read the person, read the context. All of that, I think, is going to help. But know that there is always a risk, and you might have to do some maintenance to restructure or help that friendship grow from that point. But I think if you find the line and you don't cross it, I think you have lots of great fun and adventures of planning pranks to come, and to relive those and share those. And for anyone who has pranks that did not cross the line, or if they did, if it happened to you and you crossed the line, you know what I'm about to say. I want to hear all about it. Because I love Impractical Jokers. I still get cringy. I'm, scared of pranks. Don't do them to me, people. Thank you. But one of the things would be, I think it's important to expand our thoughts about pranks, including mine, right? Tell me all the good pranks that have happened and how it has strengthened your friendship. I live for that. I do, right? I love friendship. I love people who do friendship different than me, or do things that I should do and that I'm not doing. And I love to hear about all the diversity of friendship. And I would love for you to share stories. Having said that, if you do have pranks that are of the dark side and you want to share, I would be happy to talk about this topic more, whether it be the light side or the dark side, and we can kind of work through why maybe this prank didn't work, why it crossed the line, why the person was upset about it, and just understanding it more when pranks shouldn't be done. I think that makes us better friends and better pranksters, to be perfectly honest, right? So if you have a story to share, please email me at bestforeverspod@gmail.com. You can also go to alysalucas.com, and there's a way to contact me on my webpage for all of my podcasts, so you can reach out that way. So tell me everything, friends, and until next time, consider if pranks will bring you together or pull you apart, because without our friends, who'd we be? Thanks for listening to Best Forevers. If you like what you hear, be sure to subscribe, rate, review, and of course, share with a friend. Please be sure to follow Best Forevers on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Best Forevers Pod, and I'm at Dr. Alysa Lucas on Twitter. You can always find the podcast webpage for more information at bestforeverspod.com and share your stories of friendship by emailing me at bestforeverspod@gmail.com. And if you'd like to support the movement to love on our friends more, check out the podcast on patreon.com/bestforeverspod. Now, friends, check out this recommended podcast that you must get in your ear holes immediately.
Hello friends, we are the Ladies of Strange. I'm Ashley.
I'm Tiffany.
And I'm Rebecca.
Have you ever wondered if Jenny's head really did fall off when they removed the green ribbon?
Or if aliens are hiding in the tails of comets waiting to take us away?
Or if there's any scientific basis to the Ouija board?
Well, then don't risk your search history and join us each Thursday as we discuss
the history, mystery, and theory
of all things questionable, odd, and eerie.
New episodes are released every Thursday. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. More information about the show, including show notes and links to our social media, can be found on our website, theladiesofstrange.com.
Keep it strange, lovelies.